Hey CJN podcast listeners, Michael Freeman here, executive producer. I wanted to share that the CJN has earned 6 Simon Rock Hour Awards this month, the Jewish Pulitzers, as some folks call them. We took home awards for magazine writing and design, and for feature stories on a Holocaust music project, BDS on Canadian campuses, and 4 women who discovered they were sisters in their golden years thanks to 23andMe. But we can't create award-winning journalism without your help. If you value independent Jewish journalism, please consider supporting us today at thecjn.ca/donate.
The reason that some of these stories end in a child coming home is because of the people like you in this room like this and the organization that you guys are supporting. But before they come out here, I want to say one last thing. As a father who stood on the side of this that no one ever wants to stand, what these people do is not an idea, it's not a nice cause, it's not abstract. One day, God forbid, if you ever need them, if that day ever comes, you're going to want them to exist.
Those were the words of Esti's father, Joseph Naft, speaking at a Thornhill synagogue recently during an event to honor the Shomrim Toronto safety organization and how their volunteers mobilized and coordinated many hundreds of community members who helped Toronto police search for Naft's missing autistic teenage daughter for 13 harrowing days in May. The search for 14-year-old Esti captivated the city and the Jewish community here and abroad. From the night she ran away from home without her shoes or a coat or her phone on May 15th, the search through Earl Bales Park's ravines, early sightings at a fast food restaurant and on a Toronto city bus, and then the search punctuated by a weekend of anger when we learned that posters of her were being torn down by anti-Semites. While the police handled the high-level search, Shomrim Toronto swung into action on the civilian side. A command post went up at the Naft family's synagogue Petach Tikva Anshe Castilla for a few days, and then Shomrim moved into donated space in an office building on Wilson Avenue, where volunteers received grids and maps and were sent out with new flyers. Searchers were spreading out across the city all the way down to Lake Ontario, and a donor offered a $25,000 reward. People and politicians came out every day for nearly 2 weeks, even on Jewish holidays, to look for her. Then on May 28th, Toronto police called a media conference at Earl Bales Park and announced they'd found Esti alive in a basement apartment in Etobicoke. How she managed to get there, we were never told. No charges are being laid, police said, and the case is officially closed. The family has asked for privacy and for folks to remove Esti's photo from their social media, but the impact of the search hasn't gone away, especially for people who helped look for her. Now we're taking you behind the scenes of the largest community rescue effort Shomrim Toronto has ever run, and what it was like hour by hour during those difficult weeks.
I didn't sleep more than 2 hours a night, if I was lucky. It was constantly, there was information coming. Someone had to keep being the guy to relay information, pass information, receive information. So it was a non-stop operation.
I'm Ellin Bessner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, July 24th, 2026. Welcome to North Star, the flagship podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Shomrim Toronto was founded in 2021, 5 years ago to the week that Esti went missing. It was a response to the disturbing anti-Jewish protests and threats in Toronto, which erupted when Israel and Hamas fought a brief war that spring. Shomrim started with about 20 volunteers who patrolled by car around Toronto and York Region synagogues and neighborhoods. Shomrim Toronto is modeled on a similar Jewish safety patrol organization in the UK and also in the United States. They are not armed, and they're separate from UJA Federation of Toronto's own Jewish security network. And although you've likely seen Shomrim volunteers at the Walk for Israel or escorting Jewish leaders, their profile has grown exponentially because of their frontline work in leading the Jewish community's civilian search for Esti. Today, I'm sitting down with Shomrim Toronto's founder, Avi Grinberg, and director Kevin Menachem Silver to talk about that extraordinary effort. It's an honor to meet both of you. Welcome to the CJN's podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
First of all, congratulations on receiving this Community Service Award. I want to go back to that night at the synagogue because the words come from the Psalms, right? Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael from Tehillim. And it's a line many of us have heard. When you heard the father of Esti speak about everything Shomrim did for his family, what was it like to hear those biblical or the Hebrew words?
Extremely emotional to hear Esti's father get up in front of a crowd that he probably didn't know majority of and speak so highly of us, even though what we do for anyone that calls. Just hearing those the true words coming out of his mouth after the 2 weeks that we all had together was truly inspiring. So from the moment we met Joey Neff, it was obviously, given the circumstances, it was not the most pleasant scene you would want to be a part of. And you're obviously not in the right headspace when you're in a crisis like that. But being able to give Joey a hug once Esti was found, and him acknowledging and just, he didn't have words to express what it felt for him as a father to have so many hundreds and thousands of volunteers come out to help search for a stranger that some of us never even met before. I personally had no idea who Esti was prior to this. That's what is so unique about our community, is that when someone's in crisis, we're all in crisis. And I think it was Rabbi Neff that said it best. We treat a missing as one of our own, as a sibling, as a, relative. Whereas the general public, they don't have that same strong connection like us as the Jewish community do with one another. And being able to be a part of it and essentially lead the community side of things was a huge honor. And something to this scale is not something we have ever done before, but we are grateful for the opportunity and the trust that was, instilled in us for this. And at the end of the day, not all stories end the way this story ended. And we are beyond grateful that we had a very big part in Esti's safe return home.
Shomrim is not armed police officers. You don't have powers of police. So what can you do when you arrive at an incident like this? What's your job?
We're no different than average civilians. We're an organized group, trained, obviously. But as far as powers, we don't have more powers than an average civilian, just like you or anyone else. Because we've been working at this now for 5 years, we come in essentially as being the middleman between the community and law enforcement. When Esti was first reported missing to the police, everything was chaotic. The parents couldn't think straight. The community members started getting involved. Everyone wanted to do something, but there was no coordination. When we got involved, that's when everything started to fall in line. We took a lead on the coordination. We brought in another organization to help the family process the crisis, while we took the lead on coordinating volunteers, coordinating other efforts, and constantly being in contact with law enforcement throughout the entire operation. So anytime there was information that the police had to share that they wanted to get out to the community, we were the ones passing that on, or vice versa. When there was information that was coming in to the family or to us, we were the ones that passed that on to the police.
So you worked very closely with Toronto Police as a liaison. What relationship do you want people to know now in the public that you guys had with the police during the whole Esti search?
We were in constant communication from the moment we got involved. It was a weekend when she went missing, so obviously there's more limited resources. But having these relationships with a different leadership part of the different police services, it enables us the opportunity to reach out to resources that may be off on the weekends or may not be in the station or know per se what's going on at that very given moment, and explain different situations, have them assess situations, and potentially involve more resources if they see fit. At the end of the day, if you ask me if the Toronto Police did whatever they should have or could have for Esti's disappearance, I can say without a doubt in my mind, they did everything by the book, and they did beyond that by extending the amount of resources that they did towards this missing investigation. In fact, we were getting comments on social media why the police were dedicating so many resources to Esti rather than the other missings that happen. Dozens of them happen daily across the city. It was something that we had to navigate, is explaining to people the difference between a well 50-year-old that went missing versus an unwell 14-year-old. Some people sometimes lack context and start comparing and making assumptions based on that. But given the information that the police, I guess, had at the very beginning when Esti first disappeared versus the information that we, amongst others, brought forward, it eventually elevated the severity of the investigation, which also opened the doors for the police to bring in extra resources, extra investigators, have more cars out doing patrols, more specialized units on the ground doing different things that not necessarily everyone saw or knew about. We were in the know of the resources that have been assigned. We were in communication with the lead detectives. In fact, the chief even came to visit our command center at 20 Danby at Petah Tikva. When the search was upgraded to a level 1, there was a press conference about that at Earl Bill's, like you remember. And after the press conference, the chief of police, Myron Demkew, came and said, "Let's go over to your command center. Let me introduce me to the dad, introduce me to the family. Let me see what the community side of things look like." And he amongst a lot of the Toronto police leadership were blown away. Even non-leadership, just officers that we interacted with, were blown away seeing how the community came together for someone that they had no idea. Most of us had never met before. You ask me if they did everything they could. I believe they did everything and then some. That it's not like we're calling and crying wolf asking for help. They understood. They did what they had to do.
Right, because there was some nasty stuff saying, well, you Jews, you look after your own, but what about everybody else that's missing and blah, blah, blah. But the other thing to point out is that the family didn't, or it wasn't released for several days, that she is on the autism spectrum, which made things more risky.
Rightfully so.
So that was your role in playing, is to urge that to be put out? Is that what I'm understanding?
A lot of the information that there was hesitancy to bring forward, it wasn't just ours. It was everyone involved, whether it was family, friends, the crisis intervention team, alongside the police. Everyone had a role in the overall investigation or helping bring Esti back.
And to be clear to anybody that complains, you're free to start your own community organization. No one's stopping you, right? If you need people taken care of, don't complain about it. Go and solve it.
In fact, I've offered, if other communities wanted to start something like this, I offered to help.
Before we go any further, you mentioned an organization that was liaising directly with the family, I guess Crisis High Lifeline did for the family. Got it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did offer when Esti was disappeared?
So Esti went missing Friday night around 11:30 p.m. is when she left the house. We only got a call from Esti's family Shabbos afternoon about 4:35 p.m. We were already 12 to 18 hours behind Esti's disappearance, and given the fact that it's Shabbat, we only operate in an emergency basis, which in this case, obviously, a missing youth at risk is considered life and death. At that point, we started coordinating with police to get an understanding of what they have already done, at the same time as having our volunteers start canvassing the area. Once Shabbat ended is when the outpour of support started, when we put out a poster to the community notifying them of Esti's disappearance. Instead of us primarily focusing on the actual searching ourselves, we brought in 2 search and rescue organizations from New York that specialize in search and rescue. one of them being Matzel and another one being Chaverim of Rockland. We had assistance from the community that was out hanging flyers, interacting with people, talking to people, see who had seen her, etc.
Camera footage.
Reviewing camera footage while the two organizations were out canvassing the parks, tracking down leads. Essentially, all of this led to the police making this search go from a level 3 to a level 1. It was the lead that we, as the community organizations involved, physically brought them, that pointed to her being outside of the park on that same night that she disappeared, which is what led to the increase of the priority, and then eventually shifted their focus away from the park, because the first 4 or 5 days they were focused on the park, assuming that she was still there. They couldn't put that past them until they had proof that she was elsewhere or else.
So you're talking about the bus, like, let's get granular. The bus footage, the Popeyes footage, other things.
Popeyes footage came from us, Bathurst and Wilson, etc. All of that came from collaborative, us finding footage, letting them know, them going to gather it themselves, or letting them know of different tips that were coming into us as well, and working together to have the same result of bringing Esti home. Everyone was doing their part, from organizations helping us with printing flyers to or people ordering us food and dropping off food for the volunteers, people coming into the command center to help coordinate the volunteers. We probably poured in thousands and thousands of man hours into this 2-week operation. I didn't sleep more than 2 hours a night if I was lucky. It was constantly, there was information coming. Someone had to keep being the guy to relay information, pass information, receive information. So it was a non-stop operation, which also then led us into Shavuos, which we also went and consulted with our rabbi, Rabbi Lowy, who at the time, given the fact that she is still missing and in danger, gave us the green light to continue doing what we were doing throughout Shavuot. And, we were grateful to, over Shavuot, come up with more leads that then continued to be followed up on, and eventually leading to some leads that led them to finding her.
Did you have a role ultimately in them finding her in that house in Etobicoke?
No, in that house per se, no, but we gave them a lead earlier on that then led to them tracking her through the subway, that then eventually, through another lead that they got, they were able to track her to that house in Etobicoke.
How many volunteers do you think ultimately took part from the community?
Thousands. And whether it was kids wanting to go hang up posters, or politicians coming to do their part, community members doing their part. Saturday night, we probably had 300-400 volunteers show up at the command center. That was just Saturday night on first night of our operation. We didn't realize the outpouring of support that we would have from the community, because this isn't the first missing that we've been involved in, but this is the first 14-year-old vulnerable kid that had gone missing, and the community felt they needed to be a part of it.
Which was actually one of our best challenges that we had to experience. We did not anticipate that there were going to be thousands of people showing up. We're always very used to operating within our team and, setting up the members to give them tasks and responsibilities. What we had to scramble with immediately was a coordination of thousands of people. How are we going to do it? And so, as just one example, somebody had developed an app for us in a couple hours in one night, so that we could have a grid that would equip the volunteers that came the next day, so that we can keep it ordered. Because you have to remember, as Shomrim Toronto is going to coordinate the search, you have to make sure that the people that are going out are also safe. You don't want it to be a free-for-all where everyone's just scrambling, running across the city. And so overnight, we had this app developed, which created grids. And so as volunteers came in, we made sure they check in. We'd give them an area, give them explicit tasks and responsibilities. We made sure that they checked in when they were done. We made sure they had enough prior instructions, what they should be bringing in case they're going to be outside. If we ever had to do something like this again, we'd love to have that. Thousands and thousands of people will deal with it. It was just as inspiring and motivating for us as it was for everybody else to see that this was incredible the amount of number and the amount of people. They didn't show up just as tasks. They showed up with emotion. They were passionate. They were there as if their own child, God forbid, was missing. And they said, really, come hell or high water, we are not stopping until this child is found. So that was incredible.
You know, you mentioned posters, so let's talk about it. I was there on the 24th of May on the Sunday afternoon. It was a rainy afternoon at the command post, and I interviewed one of your colleagues, Simi. Everybody was so distraught and upset that the posters were being torn down. And it was raining the day before, too, so some of them were all waterlogged. You talked about emotion, so I'd like to hear that.
Look, unfortunately, it's not surprising. There are sick animals in this world that will stoop. I wouldn't even say they're animals because animals typically care for their own kind. They're sub animals is what these people are. For someone to go and tear down a poster of any missing child, that was disgusting, right? Unfortunately, or fortunately, we as Jewish people especially have built the resilience over thousands and thousands of years. We're not surprised. You rip one down, we'll put 10 more up. Does it cost more money? Yeah, it does. Doesn't matter, right? And so, yeah, on the one hand, it was terrible, disgusting, and people were so, psychologically, I would say almost traumatized. They're like, okay, we understand regular anti-Semitic attacks. This is what we're used to. This is a child, for crying out loud. Like, who cares what her background is? And for you to go and tear down posters, but they might have torn the poster down. They did not tear any one of us down. That much we can say. We got right back up, made the posters stronger, and then also made sure that if we can find these animals, we're going to find them.
And there was a few that were
a few that were identified, and it essentially fueled the fire more by them removing them because more and more people were seeing it and getting angry with it, and it motivated them to come out and assist. We had groups from all across the city, outside the city. We even had a group of teenage girls that were on a graduation trip from New York. They came into Wonderland. They cut their trip short to come and hang posters for Esti.
Wow.
It made national news. It was being spoken about all across North America, Israel, and Europe, quite frankly. We kept getting calls from all the different organizations offering assistance. People that we've never heard of, spoken to. A Jewish kid was missing, and that was everyone's concern. Seeing how the Jewish community operates in the times of crisis is what makes us so unique. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we only remember that in times of crisis.
Coming up, how Shomrim Toronto's founder learned that Esti had been recovered. We were all watching social media, and it started to go like wildfire when news that Esti had been found started to leak out, and then the police said there's a press conference. Where were you when you got the news?
I, for a change, decided to turn my phone off for an hour and take a nap. The one time in the middle of the day that I decided to turn my phone off, I woke up to 19 missed calls. And
that was through Menachem, right? No.
Yeah, exactly.
And a few of them were from the police. They wanted to be the ones to break the news to us because they assumed and figured that the community would be calling on us for verification of that. And as soon as I got that call and they said, be at Earl Bell's at whatever, I think it was 3:00 that the press conference happened, I just got in the car, called the guy, said, she was found, it's confirmed, meet you at Earl Bell's. And just the relief. Seeing those 19 calls, I wasn't sure if something bad happened or if something good happened, but my heart was in the side of, because so much information was coming in, I had a good feeling about it.
Oh, so they didn't confirm anything that she was found?
I had to know. When I woke up and I saw all those missed calls, I didn't know what to expect. So right away, I start calling the missed calls back, and I got the news that she was found.
Okay.
So I was able to confirm it with our team, who were then able to put out a statement to the community, because there was a lot of speculation going on. Yes, found, not found. Maybe, other than the fact that TPS tweeted it, people still had thousands of questions. And
that's why we're doing this interview. Exactly.
And that's exactly why, as soon as I was able to confirm that with police, we were able to start putting the community at ease. She's been found, the police are dealing with her. The biggest relief was seeing the look on the parents' face. Finally being able to hug Joey with a smile and not with tears coming down his face was a huge relief and made this whole thing all that more rewarding.
So without breaking confidentiality, because I know, there's obviously some, how much is Shomrim or you personally, both of you, still involved with the family and the situation?
So I keep up with Joey. I've stopped in myself to check in on them. I keep in touch. I always want to be involved in things so long as they want us involved. We offer, our help if we can be of help. I still chat with him. I mean, Joey became a friend now. He practically, at the end of the day, we're one big community. I've been invited. He's invited me to his house for Shabbat. He wants to throw a barbecue for our volunteers. Seeing firsthand what kind of impact our volunteers had, he wants to, help where he can. But right now, we're letting him do him and focus on, healing from the traumatic experience of not knowing where his child was for 2 weeks. We became extremely close with his community, the Petah Tikva community, who played a big role in helping themselves and in helping.
Can you explain what role, if any, Shomrim had with the reward, whether it was paid out or did you just facilitate?
The reward had nothing to do with us. It was friends of the family that decided to put this reward out. I have no knowledge of if anything was paid out or if a lead that someone provided in fact resulted in Esti being found. We're still waiting to be debriefed and have that conversation with police. Our priority was finding Esti, and knowing that she's alive and well puts our objective to an end. When the time is right, we will be sitting down with police to discuss and share whatever they can share and have a better understanding of how this particular lead came to being about and her being found where she is found.
Right. And then, of course, us, just like the community, because again, we are the community, there's always curiosities, right? Everybody has curiosities and questions. But what we have to remember, all of us, is that our objective was achieved in finding Esti. And whatever it is that we're going to hear after is not just to satiate curiosity, it's to learn. It's what can we do better for next time? What do we need to know that would help us if there is a next time? How can we be 10 times better? Not just, I was curious about this, now I know what happened, right? It's human nature, of course. There's that curiosity component and there's the closure. And, we get questions all the time. And what we try to communicate to others is the closure that you need to satiate your curiosity is that she is found and safe.
What did you learn about next time that you might do differently because of what you learned during this Esti search?
For sure, the first thing we learned is our numbers that we have, internal membership is irrelevant. We have the entire city that is here. And that's probably the number one learning curve, really, like practically speaking, is that we now have to understand that we have to create protocols and plans that will allow thousands of people to help.
You do a lot of things that people may see at the Walk with This for Israel event or security patrols. Describe what you do. Is it 10%, personal security, 20% community events, patrols up and down Bathurst?
For starters, we're not security. We are a safety organization. If you want, we can start back from our founding as to how we got to where we are and kind of lead into that. In 2021, right before Shavuos, I don't know if you remember, but
I do. We went on the air that very first week. That was our first podcast week, so I remember it well.
Okay. So there was a rise in anti-Semitism happening.
Well, it was because of the rise of anti-Semitism because of Israel-Hamas's and they war after Mount Meron. Yeah.
And houses that had mezuzahs were having rocks and eggs thrown at them. And we, as a group of community members, got together and said, we need to start looking out for ourselves. The police can't be everywhere. They barely have enough time to be reactive, let alone proactive. And we thought this was going to be, a few weeks, things calm down, everyone goes on about their life. But I guess, things continued. And we saw it as an organization that was long needed in the city. Unfortunately, Toronto is always, Canada in itself is always 20, 30 years behind other large Jewish communities across the world, and we only adapt to things a little later. Whereas, let's say, New York or New Jersey, Maryland, London, Shomrims have existed since the 1960s, when it first started in Crown Heights. Because they've been dealing with anti-Semitism as a whole and hate crimes directed at the Jewish community as a whole for a lot longer than we here in Toronto have been. We felt like there was a need for an organization, a group of organized, trained individuals to be that bridge between the community and law enforcement, to help law enforcement understand the dynamic of the Jewish community when it comes to dealing with crises, how to deal with crises, the different religious laws, not religious laws, the different parts of the Jewish community.
We're patrol a lot primarily. So we have a fleet of patrol vehicles. Most are marked. Some are unmarked, of course. But what we do is we're actively on the streets in the morning, in the afternoon, very often at night, very often when people are sleeping, right? Because, yeah, it might not be an emergency if somebody draws a swastika on your garage, but to us it is. It is an emergency because it means that you were targeted just because you were Jewish. And so what we're trying to do is increase our patrols, enhance our patrols. We recently installed cameras in all the cars that will have, constant recording. And so by creating a strong presence on the streets in the Jewish dominant communities, that is a proactive approach to deter criminals. It's not always about emergency response. That makes a huge difference. The unfortunate part is you can't measure a statistic of things that don't happen, right? But the fact that less things may happen at night is probably a strong correlation that it does deter people.
Your website said, quote, you handled more than 3,000 phone calls and nearly 2,700 reported incidents. So you mentioned swastika graffiti. What kinds of incidents are we talking about that make up these numbers?
Anything from suspicious individuals, suspicious vehicles, to hate crimes, to incidents that people, quite frankly, don't understand necessarily the severity behind it that need to be reported. For instance, I'm sure you've heard about the shooting incident a couple weeks ago outside of Bobov. That incident was reported to us as an FYI because the community member didn't understand the severity of what had happened.
It's when they had those bubble guns or type things.
Orbeez gun, 3 visibly Jewish. Actually, it was 2 weekends in a row. The first weekend being 3 visibly Jewish teenagers walking who were shot at by a vehicle that pulled up, rolled down its window, shot at them, took off. Those teenagers did not get a description, or they got a vague description but no license plate. They reported it to police, and together we actually helped canvass for footage. The following Thursday, exactly a week to the date, we got a call at around 10 p.m. from a community member who was just shot by one of these guns outside of a synagogue while he was chatting with a few of his friends after evening prayers. He called to let us know about it. He didn't understand the severity. When I answered that call and I said, "Did you call the police?" He goes, "No, should I?" I go, "You were just shot for being Jewish outside of a synagogue." He was hesitant. I said, "You know what? I will personally come meet you." I had him come meet me at the gas station right beside the synagogue. And while I was on my way to go meet him, I got a call from another community member who was driving up Bathurst. His wife and daughter were in the car, and they were shot at by the same individuals with the same gun. The daughter, seeing our post from the previous week with the description of the vehicle, remembered, took a picture of the plate, and that is how the police were able to make an arrest before 8 a.m. the next morning. That's a big part of what we play in the background of things. We're constantly involved in all sorts of investigations. Quite frankly, another great example of something that we do. Last night I got woken up at 2 a.m. A woman in the community was having a mental health crisis. She was not willing to comply with the police without someone from Shomrim being there. Because again, she doesn't know who the police are. She wasn't sure what they were there for. She wanted someone that she can trust, that's a member of her community, that can be that liaison, that middleman, and explain to the police her perspective as a Jewish woman.
And once Shomrim was there, It was solved immediately. There was no issue. There was no bad interaction. She needed that safety and that understanding of here's familiar faces. I know people that I can trust. Now I'm going to comply properly.
You talk about the police. A lot of the people in the Jewish community think that Toronto Community Police do not care about Jewish safety. You've, I'm sure, heard this yourself since October 7th. What is your sense?
Yeah. Well, see, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to, this question of do police care, very often we want to see an immediate quick result, or how we determine, as a Canadian citizen, what a quick result. Somebody did something, I want to see arrest on the spot. Right. What we also have to understand is, and of course, yes, things can always be better, right? We're not saying it's perfect, but they also have protocols. They have their training and how they go ahead and do what they're supposed to do. For example, during protests specifically, right? We want to see people arrested on the spot. And of course, the bad apples, the real rotten ones, are arrested on the spot. But a lot of them get arrested after, because the police understand, if we're going to do mass arrests, that will make things 10 times worse on the spot, right? You'll notice they have cameras always. There's always cameras. They have footage, they have video, and then when their homework, when they're done, we get to go home at the end of a protest. What they do is they're going to go through hundreds and thousands of hours of footage. They're going to see, oh, this person did this. Okay, let's get an ID. We're going to go issue an arrest and a warrant, right? And so it's just, we sometimes don't see what happens right away. Exactly. And so we assume that nothing happens. But the reality is, if you follow it when things aren't heated so much, they do the best they can. Again, things can always be better, but they definitely do the best they can to make sure that the people that need to be punished are punished. There's also the Canadian legal system they have to operate in, which is a whole nother conversation, maybe a whole nother.
We could have another podcast. But, Menachem, on LinkedIn, after you guys received your award, and you wrote on your LinkedIn, you grew up hearing your grandparents' stories about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. You said, now I've learned feeling safe is not a Canadian right anymore. That is a very powerful statement. Can you tell me what led you to write those words?
It's something that your grandparents tell you when they're over for the holidays. They tell you things about the past. But as a child, you never envision things like that could happen again, right? But now you can. And what we're seeing here in Canada especially is we're getting one step closer to bad things happening. Where that statement comes from is, as a Canadian, right, I should feel safe no matter where I go, and I don't.
What happened to your child's class? There was some incident with BB guns.
Yeah, so one of the incidents of the first kids that got shot was in my son's class. So 3 of his friends were walking at night, and they were the ones that got shot first with the Orbeez. And I asked my son the next day, I was like, what happened? And he was talking to his friends. And my first question was, I said, are you okay? My heart broke for him, because I'm now speaking, right? I remember my grandparents telling me stories. Now, here I am speaking to my own son, asking him, are you okay, knowing that your friends just got shot at by an Orbeez gun because they're Jewish? To me, that was the tip of the iceberg, right? That was a breaking point when I realized, get your head out of the sand, stop pretending things aren't what they are. They are. And now with that reminder, hearing these stories from my grandparents, now I realize it wasn't just a story. They were actually educating me. It was almost as if they knew. They said, there is going to be a time where you're going to have to learn the message of this story, and you're now going to have to instill that to the next generation.
I want to end up by asking, since the Esti situation, how has volunteer applications changed? Are you getting more people wanting to join? Has it raised your profile?
Throughout the whole Esti operation, applications didn't stop coming in, from men, women, to Jewish, not Jewish, anyone just wanting to be a part of or help. We couldn't keep up with all that inflow of people messaging, because some people were calling to ask how they can help. They live in a different side of the city. They live in Niagara. They live, all downtown. They're going to a concert. They want flyers. Where should they hand them out? Who should they hand them out to?
Specifically, when I drive one of the marked cars, I would say at least once a day, somebody honks me or pulls up to me, rolls down their window and says, hey, are you guys still taking applications? Or how do I get to your website? A bus driver last week rolled down his window and said, hey, rolled out. I was like, I thought, I wasn't sure what he wanted to say. And he's like, I want to just join and apply.
All right, give yourselves a plug. Where do they find you?
ShomrimToronto.org, and all the information is available there.
Okay.
Sure.
It's been an honor to go through this story with you. Thank you very, very much for this extended conversation. It was fascinating.
Thank you.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounded like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin's Charitable Foundation. If this conversation reminded you of the power of community, or you know someone who volunteered, donated, or supported the search for Esti, share the episode with them. Special thanks to Shlomo Asayag, who provided us the video and audio of Joseph Naft's speech. North Star is put together by our team of producers Zachary Judah Kaufman and Izzy Hellenchild, who also does the YouTube videos, with Michael Freeman as executive producer and Alicia Richler as the CJN's editorial director. Thanks for listening.